All right, we are diving deep into all things Iowa as the caucus rapidly approaches.
We're joined by Reid Wilson. He's correspondent for The Hill and connoisseur of every county in Iowa. He knows everything.
Of counties, I like.
I was going to say, every county, I'm pretty sure, in the country.
I know. This guy knows more about elections than anybody else that we have on the show. So it's always a treat. Yeah. All right, so Reid, I mean, we've got a couple maps here that you wanted to bring with you. Break down some of the dynamics ahead of Iowa. So we're watching this, right before people are about to start voting. What do we need to know? What do people need to start looking for?
So there are basically three political regions of Iowa that I think we need to think about. And the winning candidate who puts together the coalition that's actually going to get more votes than anybody else in recent past has won two of those three and sort of put together different coalitions around the state. Go back to 2004 when John Kerry ended up beating John Edwards by a decent margin, and with Howard Dean and Dick Gephardt trailing at third and fourth. And what we see with Kerry's win is that basically he put together a coalition of the eastern counties along the Mississippi River there and the rural counties around the rest of the state. So the eastern Iowa counties dominated by Johnson and Lynn counties, home of Cedar Rapids and the University of Iowa in Iowa City, and then those urban counties, or those more rural counties on the river there, those are really labor heavy. Wow. The Davenport area, the Quad Cities areas, that's where sort of old Iowa labor lives. John Kerry put those two together, and even though John Edwards did better in Polk County, which is where Des Moines is, that's the third big region of the state, Kerry's margins out in the east were enough to swamp Edwards everywhere else. 2008 caucus, Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton and John Edwards. And what we see in the 2008 numbers here is that President Obama, or then Senator Obama, put together a coalition of Polk County, that's right there in the middle of the state, and the eastern college towns where he really ran up the score. So this is sort of urban Iowa, if you will, as much as urban Iowa exists, swamping the more rural areas that tended to favor Hillary Clinton or even John Edwards.
Right.
And then we look at 2016, where Hillary Clinton narrowly edged Bernie Sanders. And I mean, you go back and look at this, it's like 3 delegate shares.
Yeah,
like it was 0.2 of a percentage point. And in 2016, Hillary Clinton's biggest margin came in Polk County in Des Moines. And then she put together a coalition of the rural counties all around the state, whereas Bernie Sanders put together a big coalition in those eastern counties and really swamped her in Polk County. So basically, the rural counties in 2016 saved Hillary Clinton.
So listen,
we've got those 3 regions: Des Moines, eastern Iowa college and labor towns, and the rural areas around the state. You put together 2, you're going to win the state.
So let's analogize this to the current race, because we have so many more people now. So what do we expect for the various counties based upon your knowledge with the urban, with the young people, and with the, by the river as well?
Yeah,
what do you think
who's strong where?
So I think we're going to see Bernie Sanders doing very well in that eastern Iowa, those college towns. I expect Joe Biden to do pretty well in the rural areas around the state, areas that favored John Edwards and Hillary Clinton back in 2008, 2016. And then I think we're going to see people like Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren doing very well in some college towns, specifically Des Moines, Ames, and maybe a place like Grinnell, Iowa, which is just east of Des Moines. So
now, why do you think that when Sanders, outperforms them, especially among young people and college students?
Well, the crowds that I've seen in those particular areas have been very strong for Warren, for Buttigieg, and for Sanders. And don't get me wrong, Sanders is going to have a huge number of delegates come out of those college towns specifically. But there are also places where there are college professors and people who work around the college. Those folks are just as liberal as the students they may be teaching, but they're probably more likely to back somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who, after all, is actually one of their own.
That's a good point.
How much do these endorsements matter? And just to little bit behind the curtain here. This is we're taping this a few days before. We're posting it on Saturday. There's a Des Moines Register poll slated to come out later on Saturday. How predictive is that poll traditionally?
So the Des Moines Register poll is predictive for a reason, not necessarily the one that we think of. Polls are snapshots in time, right? They're not meant to measure who's going to win. They're measuring who's ahead at this very moment. So when the Register poll comes out on Saturday night, it will measure who's leading as we're talking right now a few days before that. And what what I'm going to pay attention to most is not necessarily who's ahead and how big the margin is, but where people are moving. What we've seen in the last couple of days is that Bernie Sanders' numbers have been on an upward trajectory across the board. If that continues, then it's safe to say he's going to win the Iowa caucuses. If, say, Elizabeth Warren or Pete Buttigieg it starts to make a comeback, I'm going to pay attention to that swing based on the previous Des Moines Register poll. And let me tell you, of all the pollsters in the country, the woman who conducts the Des Moines Register poll is a woman named Ann Selzer. She is the best pollster in America.
Right. That's what we've been told over and over again. So, Reid, this is going to come out on Saturday. People are going to have one more day to digest information ahead of the votes being cast. What should they be reading? What should they be looking for? Take us inside, as a mind of somebody who looks at this and tell them what they should look for.
Well, they should be reading thefirst.com, of course.
Right.
Everything.
Watching
Reid Wilson.
All of we're going to have. We're going to have a little delegation going to Des Moines. We're going to spread out around the state and go see Buttigieg and Warren and Biden and Sanders and everybody we possibly can. One of the things that I'll watch for is how big are the crowds. Bernie Sanders is doing 2 big concert events over the weekend in Des Moines and I think in Iowa City. How many thousands of people is he going to draw? Warren and Buttigieg have drawn really consistently strong crowds, especially in smaller counties around the country or around the state. Warren is going to Marshalltown in a couple of days. These towns are like 10,000 people, and they're attracting 4 or 5 presidential candidates in the last weekend. How big are the towns? In some cases, it's like a third of the town is showing up for some of these events. So
amazing.
I'll tell you, one thing that I keep taking away is that people are excited to show up and vote. Whether it's in the caucus or in the general election, the caucus turnout that we see on Monday is going to be, and I have no problem predicting this well in advance, is going to be by far the highest turnout that we've ever seen at a caucus. 2008 was the previous record at something like 250,000 people. We're going to see north of 300,000 people.
All right, so let's get ahead of ourselves here. Sanders rising in the polls, as you say. We're going to see where he stands in this Des Moines Register poll that comes out on Saturday. If he wins Iowa, what does that mean for moving forward? How much momentum does a candidate typically get coming out of this state?
Well, we're going to see the margin is going to matter at some point. If Bernie Sanders does what Hillary Clinton did in 2016, which is eke out a narrow win, we're all going to say, wow, he was ahead by 7 points in the previous week, and then he fell flat, so it's not going to be the momentum boost. If he comes out and he wins by 10 or 15 points, then, oh my gosh, Bernie Sanders is real and has a path to the nomination. It doesn't look like Joe Biden is putting up a big fight in New Hampshire. It doesn't look like, then we are sort of off to the races in Nevada and South Carolina and Super Tuesday in close succession. But we start thinking about the firewall of African-American voters who back Joe Biden strongly in a lot of those Super Tuesday states, and the super wild card, the guy who's already spent north of $250 million in this race,
that's right.
Mike Bloomberg. Where is he in all of this, and who is he taking voters from?
A lot to track. Thank you, Reid.
Probably not Bernie Sanders, I'm going to wager. Thank you, Reid.
You got it.
We'll have more for you just after this.